Welcome back to Big Sky Buckets. I'm Big Sky, and today we're kind of gonna do an interesting video. I haven't done a long format in a while. I feel really bad about that. I'll tell you what I've been up to, why the schedule has just been super wonky as of recently, and essentially we're gonna talk about the two teams that have been eliminated from playoff contention, one in the West, one in the East. Kind of talk about their seasons a little bit. One is a lot more, will be more in depth because they're a much weirder team. The other one is more understandable why they are out of playoff contention so far. And then we're going to talk about kind of the schedule going forward. We are about to hit the best part of basketball season, the roller coaster of straight from the best basketball tournament ever in March Madness, 64 team survive and advance. It's incredible. We're going to talk about that going forward. We will talk about the players that are already mocked to go in the first round and maybe some others as well during March Madness. So kind of like in a recap, we'll start doing recap episodes on Monday in terms of once it gets started this upcoming Thursday, that following Monday, we'll talk about some of the games that really stuck out. We'll talk about some of the players that are being mocked to go in this draft and how they are being evaluated, how I would evaluate them, all of that, just to kind of incorporate NBA along with college. I just finished working out and now I'm doing a re-recording because the last one was so scatterbrained in 30 minutes that I was like, this kind of sucks. So it's going to look a little weird today with kind of holding the mic and all of that, but who cares? And then, yeah, so talk about the two teams that got eliminated from playoff contention. We'll do that going forward, and then I'll talk about the schedule going forward. But before we begin, if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. I'd really appreciate all the subscriptions, likes, comments, all of that. I'd really appreciate the support so I can get this thing up and going. I know this is really wonky, and I am sorry for not having a sturdy schedule. I promise to make more content as we enter into kind of the peak of basketball season. And yeah, so I've been sick. I had a stomach bug that's been going around where I live. That killed me for something close to a week. It was kind of aggressive. Then after that, some stuff in my life kind of happened along mixed with some laziness. So my apologies. To be fair, in my opinion, we are now exiting the basketball slog. There's like after the All-Star break is when, and before March Madness or even the conference tournaments in college basketball that's happening this week, we kind of like, people just kind of are like, all right, let's get to the real good stuff. And that's what happens during an 82 game grind. So my fault. I understand why some of my like shorts and stuff haven't been doing well, all of that, but here we are. I'm here. Let's get to it. Two teams, they're done. Their season isn't necessarily over because both of these teams are basically rebuilding, but one is in better shape than the other. So salute to the San Antonio Spurs. You have been eliminated from the playoff contention. And in our East, you would think I'd be saying the Detroit Pistons, but no, there's a team that is worse. Salute to the Washington Wizards. You have been eliminated from playoff contention. We're going to start with the Spurs here. There's not too much to talk about. The Spurs, they essentially, you still have Victor Wembanyama, so you have every reason to watch every game going forward. There's about 17 or so games left in the season for the Spurs. You will be learning ping pong balls really soon. The lottery is your future. And even if it's not a great draft for you guys, I'm sure you can get a guard and a wing in this draft. That's all you really need. The good things. Victor has been great. The bad with Victor, this is a typical Spurs move, is when they know they're not really competing, they are the godfathers of load management. They just did it a little bit different with Vic. They didn't like sit him every other game or something like that, but they kept him consistently on a minutes restriction, and I understand. You did not want your prized possession, your generational franchise player, to get injured in any given way this season. On the flip side, this guy could have been, I know this is insane to say, but he truly could have been an all-star if he played like more than 28 minutes a game. That's a personal take. It may be a hot take as well. Who cares? The good here is that this guy is going to be fantastic. In terms of other players, Devin Vassell has had a solid year. It's maybe underwhelming in terms of what people expected from him. He started off the year very hot, and then it kind of got messy down the stretch. The other thing, when they made the turn that really helped Victor, Victor was put in the center position, and then they gave up on the experiment of Jeremy Sohan being point guard for the most part and put him back to his traditional position of power forward, and that works very well. And especially, I want to give a shout out to Jeremy Sohan, who's gotten a lot of hate this year, and I understand why. And some of it came from me when they kept pushing this point guard thing. I was not a big fan. I get that you want to experiment, especially when you're in a rebuild and you're like, yeah, this, even with Victor, I just want a little bit more talent so that we can stay in the lottery like one more year, maybe two, to get a little bit more talent so that when it's time to win, we are like gung ho, ready to go. He has gotten much better shooting threes. So I'll give him that. He's always been a great defensive player. He is a bizarre personality, and I respect that as well. But other than that, it is what it is for the Spurs. You were in the West, very competitive. That's kind of the thing that's like looming over this is like by the time the Spurs are full on ready to dominate and compete, I think a lot of these teams that are like really competing in the middle, they might kind of fall off. Like the Suns don't have as much time. It's once these contracts kind of end that things might fall apart. Obviously, the Lakers and Warriors, the end is nigh for these franchises. You have a couple more years with them, or at least with the Warriors, just because you still have Steph. But some of these teams here, like, they will cease to be in your way, and they will be in your position when the Spurs are actually ready to compete. Now, if the rumors of Trey actually possibly going to the Spurs are true in any capacity, I can't really speculate on that, but if they are, then what I'm saying is completely null and void because you'll be ready to go next year. That's really all I have to say on the Spurs. I think everyone here knows they're in a good position. This was a good year to just be bad and experiment with some things, and it was super fun to watch Victor, and you can still watch him for another 17 games, and then the season will be over. For the Wizards, to me, this is a team I didn't talk about too much. I think my claim to fame is just saying how unserious Jordan Poole was, and I want to extend it felt targeted, and I never really talked about the Wizards again. I want to extend that sentiment to the rest of this team and organization. This is an unserious organization, and they are one of the more bizarre stories in the NBA, in my opinion. Now, it's not like a big story, but let's talk about them. Kyle Kuzma should be the face of I shouldn't have said anything at all. Now, when the Detroit Pistons were on the legendary 28-game losing streak, Kyle Kuzma went to social media. Now, I want to preface this. There's basically no professional athlete that's going to watch this, in my opinion. If you do, it's best not to say anything when something unfortunate is happening to someone else, because if you get proven wrong and it comes back to bite you, you look like an absolute jackass. Now, Kyle Kuzma, during that 28-game losing streak for the Pistons, went on Twitter and basically was like, we just don't want to be the team that loses to them. Well, lo and behold, all of a sudden, they are quite literally in the standings worse than the Pistons. I don't even know how it's possible. Now, part of this is probably that the Kuzma and Jordan Poole two-man game was one of the goofiest, the lowlights that they collected trying to do flashy plays is one for the books, in my opinion. It's like it's like if both Shaq and Kobe were both just fucking around the whole time. I'm sure you'll find it on social media, on YouTube and stuff when the season is over, but there are a lot of just like trying to throw an alley-oop off the backboard and that just falls flat immediately, trying to do some crazy other lob and you just turn the ball over. Yeah, but it's not even just negative. The Denny Avdia kind of arrival in the middle of the season was also bizarre in and of itself. Deni Avdia, at this point, people had just come to the conclusion this is a role player. He even took role player money in terms of contract extension. I think it was like 4 years, 16 million a year. That's a solid role player extension. And then he kind of goes on this spurt of like having 40 points every single game. And it's like, oh, this guy is just an incredible slashing player. It's like, okay, this might be a guy for the future. I don't really know what has happened to him since. I don't really know what's happened there in that sense. We already knew Bilal Koulibaly would be part of the foundation of this team going forward, and he would be an experimental player, an incredible defender, but the shots aren't falling there necessarily, and that's going to work itself over time, you hope. That's the hope. You kind of can't really bank on anything less than you got to give it a go. He's super young. He's a foreign player with great defense, and the wingspan is insane. The other really weird thing to me is that I've only ever seen this happen once with Dwayne Casey and the Pistons, where they're like, we do want to move on from this head coach who hasn't really been 500 in his tenure here, but we don't want to fire you either. So in fact, we're going to promote you straight to the front office. Now, I'm not going to talk like I know if this is a good or a bad thing, but to me, I guess in my opinion, it's kind of weird when you promote your head coach to the front office and that head coach was not good with that roster. We're kind of seeing that now with the Pistons of like, they're still kind of bad here. But whatever. They promoted Wes Unseld Jr. to the front office. That was bizarre in and of itself. And really here, the other thing, whereas the Spurs are in a good position, the Wizards, the one thing that's really nagging at me, and I do respect it. I do respect it. When a player and an organization are like, we kind of like, a player wants to be in a bad situation, he's still going to have the same contract, right? Kyle Kuzma his contract would not go down or up based on being traded, but the organization goes to him, and that's very out of respect, and like, hey, we want to trade you to the Mavericks. Do you want to go? And he says, I want to build something here. I do respect that. I do not have hope for the Wizards to do that in the time frame that Kyle Kuzma will be there, though. So I do want to say that. That's the one thing that's nagging at me of like, for this franchise, draft capital is everything for a small to medium market team in a rebuild. You didn't get it from Bradley Beal because you gave him a no trade clause. Thank God this is a new front office, in my opinion. So he's gone. You barely got minimal assets for that. Then you flip that for Jordan Poole, and you kind of hope that he bounces back. This year was not that year. We'll see down the road if like the criticism will get to him and inspire him to be a great basketball player again. I do not know. Then you get some assets from the Daniel Gafford trade. That is good. But otherwise, you didn't really get a lot. I know it was a sign-in trade. You didn't really get a lot of assets for Kristaps Porzingis. Going forward, after the draft, which in the draft here is if you win it, just go for the guy with the highest ceiling. There's not going to be any Victor Wembanyama in this draft. You should go for highest ceiling, and then even further than that, maybe just trade some of your players during the draft. Some of the more role player-esque players just for more picks. And that's really where I want to get. I've been critical of the Wizards, and I will continue to be until I see them get more draft capital. Because I think going forward, that's just what they need so that they can try and put a foundation in place. Because right now, this whole team is kind of a question mark. There's some gambling here, or there's more of betting on if we can actually develop him and Bilal Koulibaly. If he's part of the foundation, Deni Avdia on the good contract is good. You don't really know, to me, I don't really know where Kyle Kuzma fits into this. You really hope, again, it's a lot of like hypotheticals instead of like a foundational, like a plan. There's not necessarily as much of a plan here. And I think they need to start moving towards that of vision, because right now there's just so many moving pieces here of like, I don't really know what I'm looking at when I look at this team. So yeah, uh, one more salute to both of these teams. They're both rebuilding teams, so it's not that much criticism, in my opinion. Once we start getting to the teams like the Hawks, that's when it's going to be me really ranting. And I'm not going to talk about certain, there's going to be certain teams that we're going to talk about where it's like, what the fuck happened, guys? Um, but we're not there with these teams. We knew they were not going to be great. It is what it is. We will see. We will talk about certain players that these two teams should be looking at going forward once we're done with March Madness, during March Madness, all of that. And that gets us to segue straight into what is the plan going forward with the channel. So I'll still be doing shorts on the NBA while March Madness is going on, and I will be doing recaps. I think recaps is the best way to go. I can't come on here like Friday at 1 a.m. and start recording and editing an episode for the first day of March Madness and then do the second and third and fourth, because that first weekend from Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, it's electric every time. During the first round and the second round, it's awesome. It's best to do a recap and only talk about some of the great games, and then talk about the players that are most likely, that are already mocked to go in the first round and maybe sell them in the second round, that either helped their stock rise or kind of floundered and had their stock fall. That's going to be not this upcoming Monday, but the next Monday. And then before that, I think Tuesday or Wednesday, book it. We're going to do kind of fill out my March Madness bracket once me and my friends do the whole March Madness, getting the tournament challenge going. I will just do mine in front of the camera, and we'll talk about some of these teams. Yeah, so on Monday, I will probably just read up on a bunch of the teams that I'm not as familiar with, because some of them come from really bizarre conferences, but we're going to do, come Tuesday, Wednesday, filling out the bracket and talking through some of these teams and matchups and stuff. And yeah, that's all I got for you guys today. Thank you for listening to this just bizarre episode. I am trying to get back into the swing of things, so thank you again, and I will see you on Tuesday or Wednesday. Peace.